course, yeah. And you trust that we'll utilize it further.
All right.
All right, and of course, we're back to you with an overview of the 3-day visit of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex to Africa's most populous black nation. It is the first time the royal couple would be in Nigeria to promote the Invictus Games on its 10th year anniversary since Prince Harry started the Games in 2014. The Duke had used this long-time achievement to promote the Games established for wounded female and male soldiers, while here, Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, opened up about her Nigerian heritage at an event on women in leadership during the royal visit. Now, throughout the 3-day visit, our reporters and correspondents covered these activities, giving us on-the-spot analysis of these unfolding events.
Do you believe there is a stigma when it comes to mental health? Too many people don't want to talk about it because it's invisible. It's something in our mind that we can't see. It's not like a broken leg, it's not like a broken wrist. It's something that we are still relatively unsure of. But guess what? Every single person in this room, the youngest, the oldest, every single person has mental health. So therefore, you have to look after yourself to be able to look after other people, and other people have to be able to look after themselves to look after you.
I'm very overwhelmed. So I want to start by saying thank you very much for just how gracious you've all been in welcoming my husband and I to this country, my country. When I had done the genealogy and found out about my heritage, the first thing I did obviously was call my mom because I wanted to know if she had any awareness of it. And I think being African American, part of it is really not knowing so much about your lineage, your background, where you come from specifically, and it was exciting for both of us to discover more and understand what that really means. Never in a million years would I understand it as much as I do.
So that's when we balance how we don't.
I'm very overwhelmed. So I want to start by saying thank you very much for just how gracious you've all been in welcoming my husband and I to this country, my country. When I had done the genealogy and found out about my heritage, the first thing I did obviously was call my mom.
You did the interview, so you did.
Well, yesterday we were able to catch up with our correspondent, our senior correspondent for defense, who followed this visit all through CFON SCN, and this is an excerpt from that interview.
Yeah, well, it was exciting, yet challenging, considering the fact that you have two members, you could call them, of the royal families, although people say they're no longer members of royal families, in Nigeria for the first time on the invitation of the Chief of Defense Staff. So it's not just a social event only they're coming to attend. They're also, mingling with the top brass of the Nigerian military. So you expect that that regimentation would also be there. So, for instance, visiting the CDS, that's the Chief of Defense Staff, within the premises of the Armed Forces complex, you can imagine the security challenges you would confront as a reporter, the restrictions. As a reporter, I know at one of the ceremonies, Prince Harry said Nigeria is the first country in Africa to be part of Invictus. So for him, that's a plus. So if I am to draw from what he has said, and without speaking from the organization, I would say it's better late than never. But for the fact that Nigerians who participated at the Invictus Games, talking about members of the armed forces who won laurels, is indication of the fact that, or indicative of the fact that if we participate more at such events, talking about Nigeria, the sky is bright and blue, and we could win more laurels. So, like I said earlier, I think it's better late than never. What will stick with me for life would be when they visited the school somewhere in Wuse, and they were received by the children, the warmth, the cultural displays, I think that for me, it's something that would live with me for a very long time. And the next would be when the grand reception was organized for them at the Armed Forces mess, where the Chief of Defense Staff and the Minister of Defense received them. That again was another moment that would live with me for a very long time, considering what you would call the thrills, and the culture, and the gifts they got. They got some gifts at that ceremony. The color, the ambience at that ceremony. The prince himself said he was, I say, overwhelmed by the warmth that he received, and he had continued to receive even after that time coming to Nigeria. So for me, I think those were memorable moments for me, as well as the time I got a clip when they arrived in Lagos. At the airport, there was also these cultural displays, and they couldn't help but they were carried away, express their emotions at the airport and afterwards. So for me, those were moments I think would live with me for a very long time. We didn't have the opportunity of having that interactions. Every attempt we came close to the prince. In attempt, to get an interview, we're told we weren't allowed, by those members of his team, as well as those on the side of the military. And so it was not going to be speaking to the media or conducting press interviews, except for public statements in the course of his tour, 3-day tour of Nigeria. But what we also gathered was, if we had wanted exclusive interviews, it could have been arranged, but there was a company responsible for managing that. So of course, it had full rights to, managing the interviews on behalf of the prince. So we didn't get that access. But talking about members of his team, they were all over the place ensuring the prince was comfortable, the prince was achieved all he wanted to achieve, he interacted well, there was that connect between him and members of the Invictus who were around, They were friendly though, but they were firm when they needed to be firm, especially when you tried to break that wall through and to politely get you off the way. For events that were strictly organized by the military top brass, talking about at the Defense or Armed Forces Complex, the Armed Forces Officers Mess, those are areas where access is restricted. So you needed to get through to the military authorities to get a pass or accreditation, or your organization gets an accreditation to allow any member or official of its, to have access to cover. In this case, TVC is known and we have that accreditation. But for other events, social events, attended by the prince, this was at the defense headquarters, and of course, being an accredited defense reporter, we had access. But when he left here and went for some other social engagements, like with INGOs, of course, the responsibility becomes that of the INGO to, grant that access. So you have to approach them for that access, or, get the information, get to the venue in good time, take a good position, and just wish for the best. Of course, you can't get it 100%, but just make sure you get the pictures, you get the kind of sounds you want, and if at all, you get an interview. Just like a journalist, professional journalist would do, you would have to research every subject or topic. So I did lots of research on the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Even how to pronounce the name Sussex, I had to check it up online, because there's several modulations. Even in Nigeria, you had Sussex, several twangs. But for me, I had to get it right online, and pour through several information, the life of the prince, his wife, the Invictus Games, the itinerary in Nigeria, what it would look like, where they've been before, now, his movements even before coming to Nigeria. I had to do lots of research to, and also to understand the etiquettes, surrounding him, or maybe before, while he was, in the palace, and after now he's still prince though, but that royalty is not, doesn't have the paraphernalia of that royalty anymore, and let's understand that, and the fact that he's coming to Nigeria as a private citizen, not coming, as it were, a member of the royal family. So understanding the etiquettes, and the aura, things to expect, so was, quite key for me. And the internet played a very good role. Lots of research on my mobile device and on this system. The whole event is the visits, and indeed has brought the spotlight, number one, on the Invictus Games, and Nigeria conquered the organization in Nigeria responsible for the Invictus, and as well as those participating in the Invictus Games. Not many of the wounded soldiers knew about the Invictus Games, so one heard from the other, and the message kept, kept on being passed by word of mouth, and eventually. But now this has brought the spotlights on the games, the organizations, and those involved, and the opportunities, and the fact that, in spite of the fact that many members of the armed forces have sustained life-threatening injuries, some have lost limbs, some have lost their hearing, some eye, like the one, that spoke at the reception. He says his hearing was barely 28%. He's lost one eyeball. He's lost an arm. But the fact that he still has something to live for. He's still serving in the Nigerian military, participating in sports on the platform of the Invictus Games as it is. And we're going to have more of such persons. So it's something that's going to give them, hope that in spite of the fact that they sacrificed their lives or their limbs or parts of their bodies or their organs, in service of the country, that there's still something to live for. For me, that's the message that has been amplified by the visit of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. I think the ultimate goal is the establishment of the Invictus Center in Abuja. That for the Chief of Defense Staff, he emphasized all through the visit, is his objective, and he's using his office to facilitate that. I think they've gotten a parcel of land where that center will be built. The design is already there. We saw the design on display at the reception, and that's a 3D design, and that center would cater for members of the Invictus Games in Nigeria. For that, for the Chief of Defense Staff, he sees that as his ultimate objective, and achieving that in real terms would bring him fulfillment. And for us, I think it will also give us some level of fulfillment too, as journalists and as Nigerians, that the sacrifices of our heroes still alive would not be in vain.
I think, the last part of that interview got a bit emotional. When Sifon was narrating, how the prince, why the purpose for the game, which is of course to recognize what our heroes, the wounded heroes that we have done so far. I think that to a large extent, we should say a big thank you to our wounded soldiers who have been on the forefront. Do you remember we had one last week?
One of the Invictus Nigerian conquered, I met Dean Ofuchiri or so sharing his story, the fact that he was a victim of a bomb blast. And then he says that for him, the victory came that when he recovered, when he became conscious in the hospital, and he asked, were there any other member of the troop that was injured? And they said no, so he felt fulfilled because his responsibility was to detect where the mines are. The fact that if there was going to be a blast and he's the only victim, that was enough for him. And this was coming from someone who, has 28% visibility and also hearing, lost his limbs. So yeah, tells you a lot about how real it is for the soldiers who actually face this war on the war front. So, thank you.
We want to say a very big
you.
thank you to all our wounded soldiers. I think that it's a big one, and they're doing the country very proud. We'll take a break. When we come back, I'll go straight to Sport News. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.